personal branding is a journey. It's not a destination.
Yeah.
So you have to constantly seek feedback, reach out to friends, colleagues, ask them for feedback, let them tell you what they perceive of you, and do your own internal self-audit and ask yourself, do you want to continue being known for those attributes?
Hello, this is Saved by Nobel. I'm your host, Denis.
And I'm your co-host, Vicky.
I am very excited about today's show, Vicky. Of course, it's been a long time since we recorded. And I must admit, I'm a bit intimidated by my lack of knowledge in terms of the topic for today.
Okay.
But that is why we have this Saved by Nobel, the Learning and Growth Show. It's about those things that might be strange for your co-host and might also be very strange for our audience, our listener. And so, here, ready to learn. Take it away, Vicky. What are we going to learn about today?
So first of all, before I delve into what we are talking about today, Denis, congratulations on your wedding anniversary.
Oh, wow. Yes.
Yeah. So
it takes work.
It takes work.
It takes a lot of work.
You are doing well. Well done.
We are doing well.
Yeah, yes, both of you. So today we'll talk about personal branding, Denis. And this topic was inspired by the book, The Brand Within. I don't know whether you've heard of the book, The Brand Within, or do you know of an author called Damon John?
I know Damon John.
Okay.
The guy from Shark Tank.
Absolutely.
Yeah, but I must admit, I've never really thought about personal brand until you actually mentioned it to me. That's why I started the show setting expectations about how much I do not know about today's topic. So I'm, clean slate. That's me today.
Okay, so let's dig into this. So Damon John, as you said, is a Shark Tank, is a investor in the Shark Tank, and you all know him as the founder of Fubu,
yes,
the fashion brand. And I started watching Shark Tank way back through recommendation of a friend. My friend knew I was very passionate about sales and marketing and also entrepreneurship, and she recommended this show. So I started watching, and Damon came across to me as a very shrewd investor. He's very cold and sometimes takes very calculated approach when it comes to discussing with the guys who are pitching their business proposals. And so Damon has written a book called Brand Within, and this book showcases the power of branding all the way from the time one is born to the boardroom. And it's a very fascinating book. And in the book, Damon gives very several examples around branding. And one that stood out for me when I read the book is the example of Barack Obama. We all know Barack Obama. So Barack really rose from being a community organizer to being the president of the US. It's such a big deal. So Damon says that from the day you are born, you're branding yourself as something or another. So you cannot run away from personal branding.
Yeah. And I must admit, Vicky, because when you talk about brands, I think the thing that comes to mind, and remember this show is about taking the things that we see work elsewhere and applying it to our lives in a very unique way. Of course, taking into account our context in Africa. So when I think about branding, I think about those intangible attributes that add a lot of value to a business. So for example, if I was to have a drink, if I was to manufacture a drink, I will put some sugar in it, I will put some color in it, and then I'm going to sell it, and then I'm going to call that Denis, the Denis drink, and put it on a shelf next to Coca Cola. It might be the same quality, it might be even better, but just because Coca Cola has that brand value, then they might retail at a better price than me. So that's my understanding of branding. So when you bring about personal brand, and then you now start getting interested in terms of reading books about personal brands, I'm actually very interested in what led you down that path.
So that's a good one, and I'm glad you've also given your own understanding of personal branding with that example of FMCG. And that brings us to explanation or description of what personal branding is all about. So Denis, personal branding is the intersection between the perception that people have of Denis and reality, who Denis is in reality. So that intersection is what we call personal branding, what we perceive you as Denis versus who Denis is in reality. Yes. So that I would say is personal branding.
And of course, I'm going to ask you questions until I really get this. Still a bit confused, I must admit. So when you talk about people's perception of me, I know people are entitled to their own thoughts about who Denis is.
Yes.
I'd like to take the positive ones. You know, I am tall. I'm at least 2 of those TDHs.
Yes.
And then I sometimes come out as serious. I love having fun, I think. So there are people's perception of me, and many people are able to attribute, and I think I can even better off describe Vicky than the self-description is actually really difficult. But also there's the personal one, also just taking the positives and thinking about who am I, what are my weaknesses, what are my strengths, just sort of becoming very self-aware. But sometimes you look at yourself and you don't like what you are at the moment, but you have a very positive view of what you want to be able to become. So when you're talking about the intersection of what you believe yourself to be and what other people think about you, are we picking the positives? Are we picking your entire you? Are we focusing on the things that you can do without struggling? What ideally are the attributes that you bring together to be able to define your personal brand?
That is a good one, Denis. And also that brings us to the steps of building a personal brand. So you mentioned that you believe you are TDH.
Yeah.
You are. I know you are
at least 2.
I know you're very passionate when it comes to learning and development, Denis. So that means personal growth is key for you.
Hence the podcast.
And hence the podcast.
Yeah.
I know you are passionate about finances, productivity, and things around finances. So I would say for sure, when it comes to personal branding, those things that you're passionate about, what your purpose is as Denis, as you live towards the passion and purpose that you want to as Denis, people will see out there. So they'll recognize Denis as that finance guru. They'll recognize you as being passionate when it comes to physical fitness and personal growth and development. And they'll be able to describe you and perceive you as one who likes to grow himself when it comes to personal growth. He's passionate about finance. He likes to live life. I know you're a football fan, Denis. So those are some of the things that you are the things we can describe perception of people towards Denis. Now, in reality, you've just told us who you are in reality. So where those two intersect is what we call personal branding. Now, the question is, how do you want your personal brand to be? How do you want people to perceive you? So you have to live by a certain attributes so that you ensure people also see those kind of attributes on you. Yes. And that's why we'll talk about the 3 steps of the steps of building personal brand. We have what you call 3 R's of personal branding. And the first R is being recognized.
Okay.
So if you want people to recognize you as a hard worker or a go-getter, what are you doing for people to really say that Denis is a go-getter and a hard worker? Yeah. So I know for me, maybe before we even get to the 3 R's, I can briefly describe who I think I am. So I believe I'm a go-getter. I'm hardworking. I'm also family-oriented. So I like to spend time with my daughter and my sisters and my parents. I would say I'm very passionate when it comes to learning and development. So I'm a passionate sales and marketer. And I do everything that it takes to perfect my skills around sales and marketing. So I constantly read books. I go back to school just to take courses that will enhance my knowledge and skill. And I like to interact with people. So I learn new language. For instance, I can tell you, when I go to Ethiopia, I'm able to have basic conversations with people in that country. When I go to South Africa, I can be able to have basic conversations. So I like to interact with people and always inspire people to be better versions of themselves. And hence, we started this podcast. So the first R of me building my personal brand is I want to be recognized as that person who is a go-getter, who is inspiring, and who is passionate about personal growth and development by actually doing things that people see that I'm working towards those passions and purposes that I have for my life. And the other R is to be remembered. So, for instance, when I go to Ethiopia, I want them to remember me as someone who is willing to learn something new and to create that friendly environment for people to interact with me. So remember, I said I like to interact with people. I would say I'm an extrovert. So I like to interact with people and make them feel friendly. And finally, being revered. So I want them to trust and believe in me that Vicky is a good sales and marketer. So when they want any consultancy or any advice around sales and marketing, I want them to remember Vicky. So in a nutshell, those are some of the 3 steps that I've put into consideration when it comes to sustaining my personal brand. I know I'm not yet at that level yet, but it's a journey, Denis. It's not a destination, but it's a journey.
Okay.
Yes.
And so I think I'm starting to get it. In terms of the personal brand, I think you've actually put yourself out there in terms of, this is what I believe Vicky is, who I believe Vicky is. And you are talking about, this is what I want people to get when they actually interact with me. And you've actually mentioned something about, you're an extrovert. I am the opposite. I don't know, most people don't believe this, but I am very introverted. And for me, there used to be a time when I would embrace that introversion and say, you know what, let's just do it. My profession, I'm an accountant. We are just meant to be introverted. I always joke that, if your CFO has a MacBook, you're in trouble. So what happens to? I think the question is personal branding something about that extroverts just do very well? Or can anyone build a personal brand? Is there any hope for Denis?
There is hope for Denis, 100%. So Denis, personal branding is basically who Denis is. So you don't have to be an extrovert to have a good or quality personal brand. So even as Denis, I know you're good when it comes to finances, and I believe that's why your company chose you to be the CFO, because they see those qualities and attributes in you, those technical skills that you have. Extrovertedness is just a soft skill that some people have and others don't have. So personal branding is not only limited to people with extrovert nature. Also, the introverts can build their personal brand. So you just have to be good at what you do, have competence in that area, let people know Denis as a certain kind of person.
Yeah.
Yes.
With some certain attributes.
Yes, correct.
So yeah, I think we are going into that term, personal brand is those attributes that people have of you. What's my role? And I think practically wanting to be able to put a lot of these attributes together, which hopefully by the end of this episode, I'm able to describe myself as my own personal brand.
Yes.
So I, being an accountant, being introverted, I like to think in structures. When I think about what people perceive of me, which sort of like brings some self-awareness aspect to it. One of the tools that I remember using very early is something called the Johari window.
Yes,
right?
Johari window, yes.
Another tool that we use in a corporate setting is the 360 feedback. I don't know if that's a very effective tool, but 360, everybody talks about 360. And so you've actually received all of that information. And then, of course, you want to be able to have those self-awareness tools that you actually apply to yourself. And a lot of them are on the website, on the internet, where you're saying, okay, what are my values? What do I love doing? What are my passions? What are my strengths, etc. Now you've put all of these attributes together. Now, how do you actually decide that given all of these attributes, feedback from other people, feedback from yourself, my sort of like future, what we want Denis's brand to be? How do we actually decide that these are the set of attributes that I'd want to be able to protect, to manage, The same way a company would have a brand manager that you become a protector of that brand. How do you decide on that?
So yeah, that's a good question, Denis. So based on the feedback that you get either from the 360-degree assessment or through the Johari window, you go through all those feedback that you received, do a self-audit and ask yourself, this is what people perceive of who I am. Which ones do I want to maintain? And what do I need to do to maintain these attributes so that the audience or my friends or my colleagues continue to perceive me as this person? Yes. So for instance, let me give you an example. I know I'm very good when it comes to presentation skills. And every time we have a company meeting, my colleagues will always say it's Vicky who is going to do it on our behalf.
Okay.
So I've known all along that I'm good with presentation skills, and of course I got feedback from my colleagues. So I'm constantly working on my communication and presentation skills so that I sustain that attribute.
Nice.
Yes. So that's just one example. Actually, before I came for this show, I reached out to about 5 friends and I asked them to tell me who they think Vicky is. They described me in their own words. And I was quite challenged because now the challenge I have is to sustain and to continue with those attributes or live by those attributes so that it doesn't change. Whatever they perceive of me, now in reality, I have to live by those perceptions so that I maintain my personal brand. That's a simple answer to you.
That's a very difficult question to answer. If somebody called you and say, hey, Denis, what do you think about me? Be honest. I don't know if I would be, but that's what friends are.
Yes.
So why is this important, Vicky?
Yes, so personal branding is very important. And then before I get there, Denis, let me just ask you one question. I know the late former Safaricom CEO, Bob Colimo.
Yeah.
So when you hear Bob Colimo, what comes to mind?
He was from Guyana? There was a country that I don't know the name. Somewhere on top of South America.
Yes,
yes. Is it Guyana?
Yes.
Guyana.
Yes.
Yeah. He's from a very strange country.
Yes.
He loves jazz. He loves jazz, yeah. Now I think about jazz and I think about him being very humble. Quite the opposite of his predecessor. But I guess it's like different stages of the company's growth. So, yeah. But mostly the jazz is what stands out for me.
Yes.
Yeah.
That's a good one. And aside from jazz, we also know he was a good leader and he led Safaricom very well. So that's one of the reasons why personal branding is important. So you just mentioned about him. When you hear his name, you think about jazz. Now, some of the reasons why personal branding is important is it helps you as a person. It exposes you out there in terms of what your likes are, what you're passionate about. And I remember whenever we had jazz events in Nairobi, Bob Colimo would be invited into those events. So first of all, it helps you to win more. So you're invited into events that people know you are good at, or you will be able to pull more crowd. If your name is mentioned in that event, you're able to live more because you're doing things that you're passionate about. So he really loved jazz and he would attend those jazz events. And of course, you earn more now that those multiple streams of income coming here and there.
Yeah.
So personal branding is very important because of those 3 reasons. You win more, meaning you win more friends, you build your network and your network. And then you live more because you're living your passion. You're doing things that you're enjoying to do. Yes.
I think the earning more is a motivation to me. I'd want by the end of this show to be able to tell people, please invite me so that I can earn more and live more. I think that makes sense.
Absolutely, Denis. And I think this takes us to the other question of how do we incorporate personal branding into our daily lives? Right? So now that you have known that personal branding is that intersection between what people perceive of you versus reality. So how do we incorporate that into our daily lives? I think the first thing is to embrace yourself and just share your story. So as I mentioned, I'm passionate about sales and marketing. I'm a hard worker. I'm a go-getter. I like to inspire other people to become better versions of themselves. So share that story. Could be on social media when you meet with people. Like when I meet with you the first time, I'll tell you, my name is Vicky. I'm a passionate sales and marketer. I like to interact with people and make them better versions of themselves. So embrace yourself and share your story out there. Let people know who Vicky is. Because if you don't talk about it, no one will know about it. Yes. I think the other thing you need to do is create value for your network. let people know what value will I tap from having Vicky around. Will I be inspired to grow my own personal self because she's passionate about personal growth? Will I be inspired to better my communication and presentation skills? So let people know the kind of value that they'll tap from having you. And then finally, you want to grow. So don't just form relationships. Look into keeping those relationships. So remember, it's not about the width of how many friends you have. It's the depth of those relationships. I know in our previous episodes, we talked about the personal board of directors, and we talked about friendships and different forms of board of directors that we need to have. So even as you form those friendships, look into deepening that relationship so that it helps you to grow even as a brand. So maybe working closely with your coaches, mentors, and doing things that will make Denis as a brand be more visible out there. That's what I believe.
Okay.
Yes.
So be very interested. I think one thing I've actually captured from that is sharing your story. There's something that I also read about, which is like owning your story, being the author of that as opposed to letting other people drive that narrative is something actually very, very powerful. And then I think the other thing that I'm getting is that, you need to be very intentional about managing it, growing your network, developing those relationships, deepening those relationships.
Great, Denis. And I think this brings us to the end of this topic. So I don't know, what would you say are your take home from the personal branding topic that you covered today? When we started,
number one, there's a lot of room for growth. Right? I think maybe at the end of this show, I'm going to be looking for feedback in terms of who I am. But I think what I have learned is that your view of yourself and the perception of what people have of you have to reconcile somehow. The second thing that I'm actually teaching myself and forcing myself to do is to, take the positives, take the positives on your story and then manage that brand. Yeah, I think if I was to describe Denis, it is all of those positive things. Hard worker in terms of the things that really focus on. I like to learn and grow. I like to figure out things. But as well, something that stands out for me is that I am fallible, right? And so I'd like to be able to share that as well, so that I bring my authentic self without struggle to other people. So yeah, the lesson for me is managing personal brand.
Yeah. Yes. And you can for sure. And thanks for that summary, Denis. And even before we wrap up with some of the books that we can recommend to our audience to read when it comes to managing and knowing more about your personal brand, I would like to say that personal branding is a journey. It's not a destination.
Yeah.
So you have to constantly seek feedback from people around you, have an understanding of what people perceive of you, and also dig internally within yourself and identify, are those attributes that I want to continue to be known for? Yes. So constantly seek feedback. And I would challenge our audience to please reach out to friends, colleagues, ask them for feedback. Let them tell you what they perceive of you, and do your own internal self-audit and ask yourself, do you want to continue being known for those attributes? And what can you do to continue living by those attributes, or to continue being known by those attributes?
So my friends, beware. I'll be asking you very, very tough questions.
Great. So I think we have some books, Denis, that we can recommend to our audiences, including yourself, now that you said you were quite green when we started around personal branding. So you can...
now yellow.
Now yellow.
Yeah.
So you're almost becoming very ripe. So one book that I would recommend to our audience is Building a Story Brand by Donald Miller. I think we'll put in the description of the episode once we put it out there. And The Brand Within by Damon John. Those two books will give you more insights towards personal branding.
Absolutely. And I'll make sure in my 2024 to actually get to define what the personal brand is. So that's my undertaking.
Yes. And finally, remember that personal branding belongs to only you, not your employer. So you need to work on your personal brand as Vicky and as Denis. Great. We hope this episode has been helpful to you in continuing your learning and growth journey. If you have any questions, reach out to us directly, preferably on LinkedIn under Victorine Ngetich or Denis Nyanja, or Saved by Nobel on our socials, that is the Instagram, TikTok, and YouTube. Also share this episode with someone who you think would benefit from it, and remember to give us a 5-star rating and review wherever you got this podcast. That's how you help us to get the word out there. Hope you've been saved by Nobel. We'll see you on the next one.